I'm Dr. Sharon Adetutu Omotoso. I specialize in applied ethics, political communication, and gender studies. This morning, I spoke on gender, ethics, and media education in Africa.
Maybe can you tell us maybe what is the difference in education in Africa than maybe in Europe or North America?
In education or in media education?
Maybe in media education.
Oh, okay. I would say that Africa is not one single entity. It is a big body of very different people, although we have some similarities. And so we cannot generalize on issues in Africa. But despite that, we have a few issues that connect us. One of it is the entrance or the introduction of media, specifically the new media and social media to African environment. And what that has done to us is that it has exposed us into connecting with the world, entirely. And with that, it didn't just come with all the blessings and the benefits and the opportunities. It also came with challenges. We find that just like we have issues with media education in Canada, in the US, there are also issues in Africa. And from this conference, I find out that, of course, some of those issues are similar. People find it difficult to identify what is true or what is a lie in the media. People fail to recognize the fact that apart from consuming information, they also produce information. And, by broadcasting and rebroadcasting some of these issues, by sharing and following blogs and spaces and people here and there. And as a result of that, media education is still requiring a lot of attention in Africa. We find that that is affecting our political space, it's affecting our socio-economic environment, and it is also affecting the interaction, the communalistic environment we used to have in Africa. There used to be this concept of families sit together, take dinner together, sit under a tree for fresh breeze, share stories, bedtime stories, and things like that. But with the coming of social and new media, everybody is busy with their phones, and that is training the relationship that families used to have, and it's creating and introducing new communities to our youths, creating and generating new issues for families, for communities to deal with, as the case may be.
And what would be your solution, like in the education of media, like to avoid the fake news or to check how news can be true or false?
Okay, first I would say that there is a need for us all, not just the African people, because what we find is that African people and people of African descent are scattered all over the world. And we have our ways, we have our networks and ways of interacting and sharing ideas. There are ways in which when information circulates within Africa, it connects with people in the diaspora. And that has numerous implications which one may not be able to control as needed. So what I will say is, first, it is important for us to understand that media content are constructed. And then within those constructions, people in Africa must recognize how to delineate between what is constructed and what is the reality on ground. And as they do that, we don't just get to do it. We've been talking about critical thinking skills, and those are not empty, because you will need background information, background skills, and trainings to be able to do that. So I say that every hand must be on deck. The academia, state actors, non-state actors, the media, journalists. We need to begin to work together to sensitize the populace about news content and how to be able to recognize what is true, what is fair, what is objective, and what is subjective, depending on the situation. It is important for us not only to identify these things, but also to begin from the grassroots, people who are not necessarily, exposed to education. They need to know because they use the phones, and then they also are exposed to some of these things on social media. They need to be enlightened about the implications of sharing, of following, the implications of using the phones, subscribing to things, joining groups and things like that. So it is important. And most important is our exposure, the exposure of our youths, to media education skills. Children, youths, they catch up with these things very fast. They are in all sorts of groups and they subscribe to all sorts of applications. And so it is important for them also to begin to gain media education skills. But how do we do that? We need to begin to create platforms also that will expose them to these things and put them where they will actually see them. We know the applications they use. We know the pages and the websites they visit often. We need to begin to find our ways into those platforms so as to be able to reach them. So it's not a thing that we can just only do, within the four walls of the school. We have to take every stakeholder in this project to begin to look at how to do it.
And do you have also a way to check the sources, to check if, maybe you said like to have a platform, but if we just have internet, how can we know that a source, it's a good source or a bad one?
Currently, in Africa, we are still working. These things are still emerging. I don't want to say we don't have means of doing that. Of course, there are means of doing it. And it's just that those outlets are not well known to people. And so when you share, when you create something, we have ways of tracking, what the source is and all of that. But these are very difficult for now. And so we will want to say that policymakers are also involved in this. We need to also begin to clean up, the social media system and let specific rules be put in place. For instance, I was talking earlier about the roles of women in media education and in the recognition of fake news. And we find that most of our women do not clearly understand how these things work. And that has a long-term effect on the entirety of the African community, because women play very strong roles when it comes to bringing the society together. And if they don't have the required skills to be able to train children, it has gone beyond just training children in the traditional roles of the family. Now you have to train children to also understand the implications of what they do on the internet. And so if they lack those skills, it's going to tell, if women lack those skills, it's going to tell on the kind of children they raise.
Okay, so how can you explain like the inequalities of knowledge for women compared to men?
Yeah, it's part of the challenges that is being faced across the world. It's not just peculiar to Africa. There are stereotypes. We have stereotyping issues. We have exclusion issues, and things like that. It's not really peculiar to Africa. But what we find is that because of the fact that most parts of Africa are still struggling with their democracy, and we're just trying to settle down with our social security systems. There's so much to do with women. Women do not currently have sufficient attention that they should have in terms of education, not to even talk of media education. And there is the fundamental knowledge that you must have before we begin to talk about media education. And when that is not there, it's a big issue. So we have this challenge of raising our women, exposing them to quality education, giving them opportunities in leadership roles and things like that. But quite frankly, we're making progress, and we're hopeful that the efforts will be increased to give women more opportunities.